Becoming American, a look into how 3 immigrants structure their own unique American lifestyle. The journey to the U.S. Push and pull factors that are specific to each individual influence how and why they migrate to the U.S. Push and pull factors that Robert Smith outlines in Mexican in New York that push people out of Tijuana included la violencia in Tijuana in the 1940s, a lack of jobs in Tijuana, where people were mostly farmers and had to make a living off of the environment, which was unstable, the devaluation of the peso, lack of social power, and the desire to become pioneers. The pull into the U.S., which were more enticing factors, were the war in the 1940s, which led to more labor jobs in the U.S., the amnesty rule that brought on illegal immigration, chain migration where friends of friends recruited others to follow, the potential of becoming a more important and powerful person, better education, and the possibility of reuniting with people that had already moved. Many Americans forgo lives in their home countries to pursue opportunities in America that were lacking in their home. In one of the first articles of the semester that we read, Cultural Change by Leo Chavez, he describes America as one of the immigrant receiving nations. The beauty of America is it allows for flexibility and room for upward mobility that we as Americans often do not realize is a privilege. Hybridity, not assimilation. Leo Chavez highlights that there is a wide spectrum of possibilities for immigrant acculturation. He outlines several vignettes that all involve different degrees of cultural reproduction and cultural change. The end result is not full assimilation, but a mixture of culture, that he calls hybridization, not assimilation. His research all revolves around the theme that the American identity is non-homogeneous. It is not static, but always changing. Despite immigrants often having the common goal of seeking better opportunities, there's no one American way of living to attain these favorable outcomes. Objective of research. My research will focus on qualitative and the inductive method. Rather than approaching the fieldwork attempting to prove or disprove a theory, my goal was to do the research and analyze and interpret as I went. The usual goal of ethnography work is to understand the perspective of the people being studied, which is no different in my case. In one of the articles we read, Ocean Goes Sociology of Urban Explorers, he studies a neighborhood bar and examines the social world of the bar and the customer's relationship with the community. He describes the purpose of ethnography as seeking to analyze how people understand their own situation in their environment and examine the connections between their micro-level thoughts and actions and their macro-level social structures and provide general explanations for their behaviors. Methods of research. Similar to Ocean Go, my purpose was to understand how immigrants perceive their situation and why. I recorded 2 half-hour interviews and 1 hour-long interview with 3 immigrants from Russia. One was from Russia, one from Ukraine, one from Georgia that was of Armenian descent at Riverside Language Program. Questions were directed around life stories and the historical backgrounds of their home countries to understand their logic and how they acculturate and why they decided to move to the U.S. After conducting the interview, I wrote up detailed field notes. Historical perspective. The approach I took towards my ethnography was inquiring about the long term and how that affected who they are today and how the decisions they're making. The historical approach that examines why each immigrant makes efforts to hybridize in a certain manner. Aiming to dissect a narrative based on the prior events to gather a comprehensive story of that immigrant's experience will enable me to make a better sense of their logic behind choosing to settle down in America and the way that they do that. My results. The participant from Russia had very little intention of retaining a lot of her Russian culture. So my first interviewee from Russia moved to here when her husband won the lottery, and she intentionally did not live in a Russian enclave in America. She purposely lived in New Jersey where there were not many Russians around, and she purposely did not want to surround herself and her family with a Russian culture and community. All of her friends in America were not Russian, and she even said that when she visited Russia a year ago, she did not enjoy it, and she found herself feeling very depressed about it and was not enjoying the experience. Her life here is drastically different from her life in Russia. In Russia, she was a professor with a PhD, and she taught Russian language. And here she works at RSL, Riverside Language Program, every day as one of the facilitators for the program. She wants to, as she says, cut out the past of Putin's politics and its lack of industrial opportunities. And so her version of becoming American is fully engulfing the idea of being an immigrant and not having to deal with her Russian past. The second participant from Ukraine continues to practice similar tendencies, on the other hand, as when she was in Ukraine, but in America. So, unlike the first participant, she holds on to Ukrainian values, as I'll demonstrate. She structured her life very similarly to her life in Ukraine, and she lives in where she lives now is a Ukrainian enclave in Brooklyn, which was a coincidence because she feels no strong connection to Ukrainian people in general. She depends on her husband for financial support and allows him to dictate her actions, which was what he did in Ukraine, so that continued. For example, she did not leave her apartment to go to Manhattan until a month after her arrival, when her husband brought her a Metro card. So she wasn't able to leave on her own until her husband gave her a Metro card, and she was able to then take the subway and all that, but she couldn't do that on her own. She does not want to get an education, but just wants to make a lot of money, which she said was a common mentality in Ukraine because of the scarcity of resources. And she attributes that to the dissolution of the Soviet Union brought on by the Cold War. And that, she said, kind of decompose Ukraine because the economy weakened and a lot of the people were unhappy because they couldn't make any money. So then there was a mad rush to make a lot of money, and so that just kind of detracted from the quality of life. The final participant from Georgia, who was of Armenian descent, says that his nation is his family, but he would actually never return to live in Georgia or Armenia. Despite displaying a vehement love for his Armenian people, he believes is because of the solidarity that was formed after the Armenian genocide in the early 20th century. Once in America, he stayed with his Armenian aunt and cousin for 3 months and said it's normal to have support like that, which reminded me of the type of kinship that Carol Stacks illustrated in her novel. He lived in a Georgian community in Brooklyn and attended a primarily Armenian Catholic church, and he tried to maintain a deep connection to Armenian Georgia, but he feels like he has no choice but to live in America because the economy in Armenia and Georgia does not allow for any opportunities. So despite having this strong connection to his home country, he feels he can't return because he won't have any opportunities there. My findings. The 3 vignettes illustrate Chavez's point of hybridity rather than assimilation. Transnationalism and migration brings about hybridity, which incites changing natives and changing national cultures, which we see in all 3 of the immigrants. Each immigrant had a distinct story and background and made deliberate choices in how they immersed themselves in America. To nuance Chavez's idea, there is an element of deliberateness involved in the hybridity of the immigrant. My ethnography focuses on the different degrees to which immigrants have hybridized according to their willingness to distance themselves from their home country. Their versions of becoming American and taking advantage of the American system are all legitimate, but by their own standards.